In movement-based games like shooters or platformers, everything is designed around the object that you control and how it maneuvers. This could be a character, an inanimate object, or even a vehicle. The point is that the whole game is built around the game's movement mechanics, how fast you can run, how far you can jump, and anything else that might be specific to each and every game. What I'm trying to get at here is that it's fair to say that movement is one of the most important things in a game.
Unless you're playing, like wordscapes on your phone, in which case, you can't move.
It's a no-brainer that slow and or unintuitive movement mechanics severely degrade the amount of fun that you can have in a given game. That's obvious, and anyone can understand what it's like to play a game with clunky movement. It sucks. But what's more interesting to me is how a game's advanced movement can allow for new strategies, add a completely new facet to an existing game, and potentially even elevate a good game into a great one. What do I mean by advanced movement? Well, I'm just talking about movement options that are a little more demanding in both technical skill and a complex understanding of how a game's mechanics work. These types of movement options are usually reserved for more experienced players of a game. Advanced movement options can open a whole new variety of strategies that were once unreachable. It could be as simple as using cool jumps to reach sniper spots you previously couldn't, or it could be as complicated as clipping out of bounds to save a bunch of time in a speedrun. Take the spin drift from Mario Kart Wii. It's a technique that allows the players to hop in one direction and drift in another. This is used for taking tighter turns and for hopping longer distances. It's done by drifting in one direction, quickly switching directions to hop in the opposite way, and then returning to the original drift position when you land. It might be hard to notice the effects at first, but there are several shortcuts made easier, and in some cases made possible only through the use of this convoluted technique that most casual players wouldn't even know about. In fact, spin drifting is only scratching the surface of what you can do with Mario Kart Wii. You've got slip drifts, chain wheelies, low tricks, not to mention the dozens of shortcuts players have found over the years, some that will probably make you question the laws of physics, but most importantly inspire you to implement some of those tricks into your own repertoire of Mario Karting skills. The advanced movement in a game could potentially be fun enough to be its own game. Take explosive jumping from Team Fortress 2. It's already an interesting mechanic when utilized in the main game, adding a large vertical element to combat where you might not expect it. But if you take it out of the context of the main game and just fiddle around with rocket jumping in an environment where you're not getting shot at, you can do some pretty incredible things. There's a whole community dedicated to just the explosive jumping element from TF2, with speedrun leaderboards, a countless number of community-made maps, trick jumping movies, collaborations, but most important to note is the fact that there is a whole community dedicated to this one mechanic, that explosions will launch you into the air, that has essentially nothing to do with the main game at all. It will certainly hone your ability to use the mechanic in actual combat, but come on, when are you going to need to do this in an actual game? The thing is, this mechanic is enjoyable enough that most people in the jumping community have more hours logged playing jump maps than playing actual TF2. When you compare the explosive jumping mechanics from TF2 and Overwatch, it's clear that Overwatch's version is much more simplified and much more dumbed down. It merely serves as another ability in your arsenal, something you can get right without any effort at all, whereas TF2's jumping is something much more masterful. This isn't just exclusive to TF2 either. I know people who only ever pick up Counter-Strike for bunny hopping, and who could forget YouTube's favorite commentary background footage, surfing. Both mechanics have very little application in the actual game, but nonetheless, there's still dozens and dozens of servers running community-created maps for people to play on. A game's advanced movement can elevate it from being a good game to a great one. You can only get so good at every game you play, so that's why it's very important to have a high skill ceiling. The important thing is finding a good balance so that your game is approachable for new players but isn't boring for players that are more experienced. If you're able to give experienced players more room to grow, you will have a more successful game with a longer lifespan and happier players. A good example of this is Super Smash Bros. Melee. Melee is a perfectly acceptable party game. Everyone knows about Smash, and everyone can pick up a controller and have a pretty decent time with their friends. However, Melee also has a huge competitive following, and it's all because of the game's ridiculously high skill ceiling. In fact, there's a whole 15 years worth of competitive Melee experience, and people are still finding new ways to improve. The way that a professional level player moves around is like night and day compared to a casual player of the game. That's because Melee has such an extensive movement system. You can juke out your opponent by dash dancing, a way to fake your approach. You can wave dash, a way to get around quickly without having to go into lag from running and without having to switch directions. You can L-cancel your aerial moves, which will have the landing lag from each move, and the list just goes on and on. The more you practice and pick up on new techniques, the more you'll improve and you'll gain more satisfaction from your play. One of Melee's classic commentators, Prague, once compared Melee to jazz. Sure, the game is a lot about execution, but it's also a lot about improv as well. You know the chords and you've memorized your scales, now it's just about how you put it all together to make the music. There's nothing more deeply satisfying than seeing your hard work and experience pay off in a way that's mesmerizing. It's the classic story of the group of friends trying to figure out which of them is the best, except with prize pools, large crowds, and hundreds of thousands of livestream viewers. If instead the game compromised of more simplified movement options that anyone could pick up and slower paced combat, Melee would have died off a long time ago. But these are only a few of the games that have this type of incredible potential. In fact, the whole speedrunning community is basically made up of players that take a game's movement to its absolute limit. The reason it's fun to speedrun games and the reason it's fun to watch people speedrun games is because it's not just something anyone can do. It's impressive, and that drive to improve is what keeps players motivated to get better at any given game. I hope that developers will continue to look back on these types of games so we get more games like this and less of this.